again to all our participants. Thank you again for setting aside time to share, participate, join, learn with us all in this excellent 4-day online course on strategic planning for vector surveillance and control. And it's day 2 of the 4-day event. I think you will agree with me. Yesterday was a wonderful start with Dr. Pradeep establishing the foundation. Really very interesting, very instructive, lots of information for all of us there. And I think you will also have picked up that Dr. Pradeep has all the necessary experience, wisdom, and ability to convey those lessons that he has gathered over many decades in his work, which dealt with, as head of the National Vector-Borne Disease Control Agency, in charge of developing strategic policy, consultant for WHO to do reviews of other country strategic plans. Loads of experience that he has gathered over the years in different settings and is now able to bring to bear and share with the colleagues in the Asia Pacific and indeed elsewhere in the world to help teach us all the finer points of what to keep in mind when you think about developing strategic plans. What are the issues you need to keep in mind, how they interact, and so wonderful person to have lead us in this strategic planning assessment webinar. I'm assuming we will have the same format again, roughly an hour presentation, 10-minute comfort break, roughly an hour presentation again, and then about a 20-minute questions and answer session. May I ask our audience members, please keep yourself on mute. It's very distracting if there's background noise. For the speaker, it's really distracting. So let's respect the need for Dr. Pradeep to be able to focus. Our audience members too, please, as Dr. Pradeep speaks, and you have a question come to mind, pop it into the Q&A box so that we can pick it up afterwards during Q&A session and pose it to Dr. Pradeep to respond to. So again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Pradeep. Sincere thank you for your time. Over to you, Dr. Pradeep.
Thank you, Dr. Leo. Thank you very much for a nice introduction. I do not know whether I do have all these things or not.
I assure you, you do.
Okay. Before we start, good morning to all. And before we start, let me have a quick recap for the yesterday's session. I think that is good, Dr. Leo.
Yes, I'd be grateful for that. Thank you.
So yesterday, we had gone to the, sorry, this is not that. Oh, why it is not picking up?
Take your time. You'll get it right.
Oh, 1 minute.
I see the participant numbers are picking up very nicely, steadily picking up. We're now on 73 participants. It's going to climb. Oh my goodness, I forget now how many we were yesterday, but it was almost around about 150, if I remember correctly.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, well done, well done. Yeah, no, that's strong interest. That's great.
Okay, sorry for a minute. We started yesterday. If you we have started for the national strategic plan, basic concept and framework when we started talking about the, and then what we have learned yesterday, that basically what was the concept when we want to make the strategic plan, what should be the framework, what are the components of the strategic plan we should, when we are writing a document or we are framing a, or drafting the whole policy document. Then focusing on the vector control, because the whole topic is revolving around the vector surveillance primarily. And then what is its significance? How do we justify that yes, it is really significant? And then what are the vector control components and how we will achieve, and then finally how we will go for the process for certification, because we are targeting some endpoint, and if we have achieved it, we have to claim it. And then if we claim it, what will be the process of submission of the claim, and then what should be the other party like WHO will be doing to frame this thing. So we have just described all those framework, policy, component, governance, bridges, and then we have also in between referred the WHO policy documents, and at different times, whatever document they have come, whatever amendment they have made during 2007, 2016. And also I informed about the process where we are targeting. We just gave an indicative example that from high burden to low burden, there are phased manner, there are in between, there are many phases which you will be achieving. Suddenly from 400, 500 cases you cannot reach to the zero level. Then what should be ABCD of this process, that we must understand, because basically we are eyeing on the elimination concept where there is a zero indigenous transmission. And when we are actually zeroing all these things and narrowing down, we should look for, we expect that there should be different strata uh, emerging or restricting to some foci which will be burning and becoming a challenge for us. So how do we classify? How do we stratify? How do we investigate those cases? What should be the timeline of 137? And because of so many variations, we have also discussed that there will be no uniform policy. So there should be some kind of flexibility. To have that flexibility, we should have a clear concept of entomology and clear concept of vector control. Vector control, we have also discussed different policy framework, what will be the input, how those inputs will be charted out, how we will justify in our draft document, so that it is not rejected. The document gets approval both in terms of physical activities and in terms of financial resource envelope. And then we put all those approved documents and frame the input, and those inputs what we do expect, and how do we proceed about that, and what is our, even after achieving the target, how do we sustain that. Then we have also discussed about the post elimination phase. If you are not getting many number of cases, maybe one or two imported cases, and you are not likely to get, once you have done zero transmission, means you have also, you are not getting the vectors, infective vectors or infected vector. There may be mosquito, other mosquitoes population. So then what should you look? You should look for the receptivity of the area. You should look the vulnerability. How do we look for vulnerability? What should be the consideration when you are framing the document? Each points of the implementation plan, what should be the importance, and how do you justify those important, that if this is done. See, always when we are discussing that, the justification is always needed to convince the other party. Then different situations, there are different variations, different challenges we discussed. And all those things will come in the significance, different components of the vector control, right from the protection. Then altogether with the entomological surveillance and with the vector control tools, what is our target? Our target, we are targeting for transmission intensity. How do we analyze? If we don't get all those things properly, we don't get all those things utilized properly, we don't get all those things implemented properly, where do we stand? Even with 100%, we are landing with 25% or 40% maximum. So these are the differential losses at different steps. These are very, very important things which we have to put in the brain of the approving authorities or the regulatory authorities, because we are basically the technical expert. Then we have to, if we achieve all those things, we get all those things, what we have to do, we are narrowing down the area, we are restricting our area. So in the area which are clearing slowly, what we have to do for first our self-assessment, self-verification by our internal teams, our core teams, our district level, state level, the national level. And finally, when we go, we have to understand that what is the process for WHO. There has also been some amendments in the nomenclature. Precisely the whole process we have understood yesterday. Now, taking the clue from this, we will start today's session. And today's session we will take on the vector control tools. So let me share today's presentation. Today's presentation is, having understood all these things, we have to go for entomological intelligence and vector surveillance precisely. All right. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So now today's session will be restricting only on entomological intelligence and vector surveillance planning. So I have already yesterday told, I have shown one slide where entomology and vector control, we have to have a very, very clear-cut mind that entomological surveillance is a very highly skilled job. It is not restricted only to the collection of larvae, domestic breeding checking, or just collecting few samples, or going to the field and looking for the breeding site. No, entomology has got lot of parameters, and every parameters has got its own significance and relevance to the disease transmission. Once the vector surveillance is giving a direction, then only our intelligence can be used to correlate with the epidemiological data and then give some suggestion that look here in this particular area, this particular method or these particular method or combination of these particular methods will be applicable. Otherwise, you are just wasting your resources. I'll give you one very, very small example that if somebody is just, these days it is actually very common in many of the places, many of the villages, that people are sitting on the bike. They have innovated with their own wisdom, but technically that is not justified. They just take a hand-operated fogging machine, sit opposite side, the driver face is on the driving seat and they sit on the, putting their face on the back side, put the fogging machine on, and then driver starts moving the bike and they go. The bike cannot be controlled at 4 kilometer, 5 kilometer, 6 kilometer, 8 kilometer, 9 kilometer, because it is a two-wheeler. It has to, minimum speed has to have above 10 kilometer, then only it will be balanced. You just can't move at 2, 3 kilometer, 5 kilometer, 6 kilometer, 6 kilometer to 8 kilometer, which is the recommended thing. So the issue is that if you are not well versed with the technique, you are not well versed with the thing, you are just wasting it. It is human resource wastage, it is a time resource wastage, it is a money also, it is waste. So that is why the vector surveillance, this topic is very, very important once you understand this. So now vector surveillance plan, we must understand what is the need basically. And that is why when yesterday I was discussing that vector control need assessment. So vector control need assessment requires, first thing is that vector surveillance. In vector surveillance, your aim is to understand the total transmission dynamics in that area. Transmission dynamic for the public health program personnel, uh, not exclusively for the researchers. When we talk in the public health program, say for example, malaria elimination, where the people are implementing agencies are district malaria officer, district vector-borne disease control officer, health inspectors, sometimes some of the block medical officers, PSC medical officers, they are involved in totality. Sometimes they cannot spare much time, but they are interested because of heavy workload of the patient load and other things. So when you talk of transmission dynamics, by and large, the transmission dynamics comes as what is the area and what is the burden of the disease control program, sorry, diseases, whether what is the quantum of the malaria incidence. But when we talk as a planner, when we talk as a policy frame makers or as an expert of the vector control, we should tell that, see, transmission, whatever magnitude of the disease, whether it is indigenous, imported, or overall, I mean, the area is endemic or area is epidemic or outbreak prone. The problem is not because of only parasite presence. The problem is basically interaction with the vectors, interaction of the host, interaction of the pathogen, interaction of the environment. So the transmission dynamics in totality, it's a outcome of the total host, parasite, pathogen, and environment interaction. And that is why this whole thing, if we study so broadly, when we say in the program, we say, look here, this time the mosquito will come up, vectors population will grow, and followed by there will be cases. So normally we say that this area seasonality is this, vector influence is this, vector proportion will be more in this particular season, and slowly it will go. Like when it starts, I will show those graphs. So by and large, when we want to understand in program mode, what is the transmission potential or what is the transmission dynamics of that area? That involves vector's influence, which is the vector which is influencing that area or which is primary vectors. May I request all other to switch off or to close their videos? Muthuraz Kalya Murthy, there your video is on when you are doing some other activity. Yes, thank you. So sometimes there is one vector prevalent for malaria transmission. Sometimes it is a primary vector. Sometimes it is a secondary vector. Sometimes it is a multiple vector. If you take the example of Indian scenario, we know that in certain areas, you have got Odisha state where you have got Culesipesis, you have got Fluatelis, you have got some area where both the vectors are there. Earlier you had minimus, you had post monsoon, you get lot of secondary vectors, annularis. There are influences in go to the northeast. There are three primary vectors which are influencing. Minimus is very potent vector. Earlier, we were calling Dirus or Balabacensis. Now it is known as Baimai complex. So Baimai and then Culesipesis invasion has taken place. In urban areas, always there are influence of Stephensii, which is very difficult to get rid of. So these are the issues which we have to study. So first is the vector influence. It is a single, it is a multiple, or it is a seasonality changes. Then what is the response of the vectors? Response of the vectors in different terms. For the environment, how they are responding, and how they are responding our implementation activities. Whatever we are using to reduce or to kill or to get rid of, how they are responding to our activities. What is the abundance of the vector? Which season it is more? That is another important aspect. So the seasonality in terms of abundance, what we used to call it as a density earlier. So density is the relative term, abundance you can measure with so many other tools. And then having understood all these things, we have to tailor our plan. Okay, these are the vectors. So there will be different strategy for minimus. There will be different strategy for Stephensai. There will be different strategy for Baimai. There will be different strategy for, if you go to the coastal line, you will get Sandaicus, or now it is known as Epiroticus. So there will be different strategy for all those things. Second part is very important, that when you are making this kind of surveillance, the first portion left hand side, when you are planning for vector surveillance, how do you do that? What is your concept? And when you do it, what are the core vector control intervention? Yesterday we have given a little bit of the total vector control. Then what is the core vector control? Like we talk of primary vector and secondary vector. So what is the core vector control? What are the different vector control for the adults? What are the different control measures for the larvae? If you feel somewhere you get outbreak, so what is your preparedness and how do you control? What are the tools you would like to use? What are recommended ones? And then having all those things put in, you have to put in such a form so that your policy, it does not rule out your policy. So if there is any policy, there is any regulatory mechanism, it should be within that frame. For example, if somebody has given recommended some insecticide which is not under within your framework, you cannot use it. So you should have option that what are the other alternatives which are already recommended, and then you can use it. I'll give you one example, the example of Bendiocar, which is very good. But when it was brought for trial, it was okay. Okay, somebody is sponsoring and WHO is recommending, and WHO recommended within the range of WHO recommendation, which is the trial start. But when it comes to the regulatory authorities and program implementation, it is not recommended. It is not recommended because of its toxicity. Many other countries they are using. So the purpose of telling is that if that compound is not recommended within your country's regulatory framework, you cannot use that. It might have cleared one step, it might have cleared two steps, it might have cleared three steps, but the whole mechanism after clearing that regulation, rules and regulation, it should be included under the program guidelines, and that we must honor. So that is what is that policy and resources. Because when you make the planning for the resources, you have to have the underlined figure that this product you are recommending, this much quantity, this area it will be used, this is tentative cost, these are all recommended under such and such government orders. So this can be applied. If all these 4-5 things you are not mentioning in your draft document, your vector control plan will never get approved. That is what the basic is. Somebody may argue on this, that if WHO has recommended, why are we not using? There are certain systems under every country. They have got own national regulatory framework. And that is why whenever you see the WHO recommendations, whether earlier it was HOOPES, now it is under PQ, or any WHO guidelines also, they are giving a general guidelines, and then they are, the one very bold line is given everywhere, that all the member states means they refer to the countries, all the member states are requested to adopt according to their local situation and local regulatory framework. They have never given a blunt statement that it is a mandatory for all the countries to adopt this. No, never. Because it cannot be given. Say, for example, if you take the example of Temifos and WHO, if you look for the recommended doses for outdoor area, I mean the hectare side, surface area, they have given 56 to 112 gram per hectare, gram or milligram, gram, 156 to. Now, this big range, double range, you have to do some trial and fix one dose, because in program you cannot give. Suppose for India, if you have got a 36, 37 states and union territories, you can't give this range. So some states will be doing 56, somebody will be doing 58, somebody will be doing 60. That is not advisable. So that is what we have to understand, and then only according to that we have to make the plan. Right. So the first one, if you want to see, understand the transmission dynamics or vector influence, vector response, vector abundance, tailoring, vector control. Let me explain the first one. If you see this graph is little bit modified from the old ones. If you divide the whole year in a monthly basis, quarterly, January, February, 2 months, then March, April, then May, June, then July, August, then September, October, and November. So 6 portion we have just divided this graph. And if you see the cases, how the cases are increasing, the cases starts increasing, picking up from May, June, and then when there is this is the monsoon season in India. So when the density goes up, the cases also goes up. This portion is a raining portion. This portion is a monsoon period. So what happens if you see, it shows one peak, if you see the black line, and then followed by another peak, a smaller peak. Now, if you don't see the vector things, you will say only that the cases are increasing like this. It has got double peak. But why it is coming like that? It is coming because this particular area where we are doing, it is basically, it's a Culicephasis and Fluviatilis multiple influence. What happens? The breeding sites, maximum breeding sites and maximum breeding potential increases during this period. So this particular peak is because of Culicephasis. But then when the water monsoon recedes and in certain areas water accumulates, becomes slow running in foothills and other places, then the area becomes under the influence of fluid. So fluviatilis maintains the malaria transmission in later part of the year. And this stretches from November, December. When there is a very cold, it goes down. But again, if it is little more, picks up in January, February, when it climates after 15th of January, it starts. So this particular portion, November, December, January, February, that particular transmission is maintained, sustained by fluviatilis. And then again, after that, when little summer starts and there are something, then it again Culicephasis starts. So once we know this particular transmission dynamics, we plan our vector control measures. So when it starts picking up Culicephasis, we start spraying here because transmission will start picking from here. And then you see we are doing spray, and this 5 months we cover by and large, usually spray 1 and 2, malaria, we have actually decided to have a continuous round. The problem, the basic issue is that 2.5 months is the residual efficacy. So 5 months you take in continuation, because if you break, the seasonal laborers who are trained for spraying, they will go, because this is the season for the agriculture sowing also. So crop people, field farmers will pick them up, these laborers, and they will leave your job and they will go. Then your second round will be missed. Somewhere if they are made permanent, they are given, okay, you start first round here, give a break, and then come back here for the second round. But usually it does not happen. So by and large, as a matter of practice, as a matter of precedence, what has been done? It is continuously this total transmission period, it is picked up and it is brought under the umbrella of spraying control, vector control measures, so that this peak is not allowed. It will remain here only somewhere. But in case if this vector fluviatilis, it is maintaining little heavier transmission, you require additional round, that is also you can utilize. So these are all flexibility which has been given to the program. But nowadays, if you see the climate effect, if the rain is intermittently continuing from this place to this place, you have to take a decision. That is the entomological intelligence. You have to take a decision, very appropriate, so that you use only the insecticide to those places where actually it is required. This is very important slide which you all must understand to give a justification when you are making plan document. After transmission dynamics, a simple example. You want to see the vector influence, as I have told that. Look here, this is a Southeast Asia region. This is taken from the WHO reference book. You see here, this is a two vectors influence, fluviatilis and maculatus. This portion is Guliciferous and Stephensii. Stephensii is all urbanized area, industrial township, and I mean wherever the construction work is going on or the people are living, it is always there. Then you see maculatus, fluviatilis, minimus complex. This is minimus, dirus, and fluviatilis. So different area are having influence of 1, 2, 3, or sometimes 4 vectors. So this we have to understand, because one mosquito will breed some other places, another will breed some other places. So how are you going to attack simultaneously? That is very, very important. And who will tell this? Only your entomological intelligence only will be able to tell. Otherwise, you will not be able to explain it, justify it, get your wisdom incorporated or implemented through the public health system, through the public health approach. You can do anything individually in your house, but you can't do through public health unless you justify the whole thing in your document. Now, if you look this, vector's response. As I told that vector response, normally when we say only insecticide against resistance monitoring. But actually it is much more beyond that. If you want to discuss about the vector response, you have to tell that vector will behave differently for the environmental change also. That is why there is now a lot of studies are going on ecological succession. They may change their resting behavior, they may change in their feeding behavior. And this resting and feeding behavior or their appearance will depend on their seasonal trends. As just now I was telling that if the intermittent rain is continuing throughout the year, then your seasonality will change. Some entomologists should study that. This is because of these intermittent rains, persistent rains continuously occurring throughout the rain. We are talking all these things in the dengue. The dengue flare up throughout the year, the cases are occurring. But we have to, now we are talking of malaria elimination, so we should also do some kind of study. Who will do that? This is purely entomological work. Then they may change also their breeding potential. Like they have changed from indoor feeding to outdoor feeding. They have changed their indoor resting behavior to outdoor resting behavior. So from these 4 combinations, exophilic, endophilic, exophagic, endophagic, this 4 combination, if you take permutation combination, there will be actually 16 combinations. So now, whatever you have been doing, all the vector control measures for adult, primarily it was designed for indoor resting mosquitoes. Now this is a big challenge for vector control. Now if the seasonality changes, your whole umbrella of insecticidal residual spray or vector control. And that is why ITN or long-lasting insecticidal nets are taking an edge over the IRS operations. Though it is very good. If it is done very effectively, and it has given miraculous impact in previous decades. But if the quality is not maintained, the supervision is not maintained, the checklists are not maintained, the proper implementation is not there. So that is why it is not taking. So these are the area, and these environmental changes which affects resting, feeding, seasonality, breeding, reproduction. This we have to study and document in that particular area. The second kind of vectorial response is towards the interventions. What interventions we are using? The first one it comes in our mind is insecticidal pressure. Insecticidal pressure, because of the insecticide used under our vector control program, the insecticidal pressures created by use of insecticide outside the vector control program. because they are getting exposure of the agriculture field also, similar kind of insecticide in different interventions. And that we measure with this susceptibility data, that how the mosquitoes are behaving against that, how they are developing the resistance, whether it is a behavioristic, whether it is a physiological resistance, whether it is a genetic resistance. I mean, what kind of resistance, what is the frequency, all those things we have to study. Who will do that? Again, there is a job need of highly specialized entomological work. Then there is another intervention, that we are protecting ourselves in urbanized area, or the housing construction, infrastructure development, how we are allowing our habitations either against the mosquitoes, or it is congenial to mosquitoes, to vectors. So that again gives a lot of impact on the vectors response. Like for example, Stephen's eye. You provide AC, you provide cooler, you provide inside, you have fridge, you don't see it. So if mosquitoes are getting optimum temperature of 27 plus minus, why they will go out? They are getting food there, they are getting shelter there. Why they should go out? So human habitation creating mosquitogenic condition is also giving a development of response among the vector species, vector mosquitoes. Total ecological changes we have understood, we have heard. Most of the people, they might have read about the history of the Aedes mosquitoes, which used to be in Americas, Amazon forest, and now because of deforestation, forest to forest fringe, monkey, apes, then it comes to the human, and now it has become so much anthropophilic that it doesn't like to feed any other place. That is a big challenge. So ecological changes slowly, it creates lot of changes in the vectors response. So all these things we have to read, we have to get the document, and then accordingly in our area, whatever vector species are there, we have to document it, we have to justify. Without justification, I am already, every time I am telling, our strategic plan will never see an approval. Now, vector abundance, one example of the mapping. This slide I have shown earlier in some other meetings and some other webinars also. This is an example of Karnataka state in India. See, they have mapped the Culicifaces, the Stephen's eye, and Fluidalis. They have mapped by the district wise. So we should have such kind of data. If mosquitoes are biting, if abundance is seen, this is one of the very good paper published earlier. So this photo I copied from Dr. Leo's presentation, but then later on I checked up. This is a very good paper article which they were published, that they were collecting the mosquitoes. This time, this was basically a human bait collection when they were showing the leg and used to collect the mosquitoes. So when you are trying to see the abundance, the first job is that map which particular area, whatever vectors are present. Then you have to understand the dynamics of these vectors, that where it breeds, where it rests, where it feeds, what time it feeds. Then only your vector control measures will work on this. And then you superimpose these maps, then you will see that whether this particular area, for example, the second one in the green line, if you overlap, it will have this and this both, but it will not have this. So this particular green on the top corner of the Karnataka, it is under the influence of Culicifaces and Fluidalis. But if you superimpose, it is not under the influence of Fluidalis. But the third one and fourth one, if you see, it is all under influence of all the three vectors. So this gives a problem. This gives a magnitude of the problem, that whatever malaria transmission dynamics is there, we will have to look for control measures for all these three. And then only you can use your seasonality plan, that what time which particular vector is coming up along with the malaria figures. This is very, very important. The total catch, biting catch. This is basically every 6 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11. So this is like biting frequency, biting timing, at what time the peak biting comes. So this is how you have to get the more number of mosquitoes. So, but For all these things, you have to understand the whole biodynamics, and this is how we do the mapping of the vectors. Now, having understood all these things, we have to tailor. How do we tailor our vector control plan? What are the evidence we have to generate, or what are the evidence we have to show that because based on these facts, we have to, based on these facts only, we have to
Ay,
uh,
alas.
who is talking?
May I ask our audience members, kindly mute yourself if you don't mind. Our audience members, please mute. Thank you. Sorry, Dr. Pradeep.
Thank you, thank you. So the purpose of telling that, we have to make our plan basically on the evidence generated. The things which I have been talking in previous slides, 10 or 11 slides, we have been emphasizing that why these evidences are required. Now, when we make the plan, we have to set right these things. We have to set right these things, that this evidence, for example, one, vector control coverage, or if you see the access to the vector control, or you see the use of the LLIN, why these are important, and if these are important, why, how it, if we don't take this under the consideration, how it will impact. So we have to have some kind of indicator. For example, if vector control we are using IRS, we are showing always that above 85% coverage in terms of room. That is in terms of structure, actual coverage, not partial coverage. If we are having access to the LLIN, how are we using that? If we are using it or we are not using it, even after having the access we have been distributed, what is your user rate? Whether what is the percentage of the population we have while doing checking, how many persons you have used in the last night. So you have the idea. So some kind of indicators you have to fix. And these are all well-written documents are there for those indicators. But when you are making your surveillance strategic plan, you have to show that, yes, this indicator is very important and this indicator we have to mention, so that in the strategic plan for the next 5 years, we will be measuring these indicators against these parameters. And that is how we will generate because these parameters are set based on the evidence, and we will assess our own performance in next 5 years on these parameters. Now, quality of vector control products. This is another very, very important, because if you don't get, you get simply chalk powder, you simply get dust, you don't simply get inert material. Because if you are looking for some wettable powder, there are wetting agents. If the insecticide active ingredient is not mixed, you are not going to get it. You are not going to get it impact, because impact is you are getting only because of insecticide. If you are taking LLIN, now recently there was a paper published from Africa. Exactly, I am not be able to show that paper right now here. But when there is an LLIN impregnation process, they used to have some kind of adjunct which used to release slowly. But normally when you test the product, you test only the quality of the net, I mean that fabric, the strength, the denier, the color, the logo, the marking, the size, and the filament, whether it is a nylon or it is a polyester or whether it is an HDP. But when it comes to the analysis, you never test the beyond insecticide, that what is the adjunct, what is the releasing agent which has been mixed with. Now, what they found in that Africa, that the paper which has been published, that the releasing agent which was added, they changed little bit. I do not know the reason for that they have not mentioned. But because of that, the insecticide was not coming on the top of this. And the whole product, it was not giving the desired impact in the mosquito reduction. very late they could find out that this product which is releasing the insecticide, actually insecticide is there inside. Whenever you are testing the insecticide LLI and cut piece with the insecticide quantity, it always comes, it perfect. But the insecticide is not coming on the top because of that particular agent which was added. So it is always created reward. So that is why the quality of the vector control product with all those specifications need to be checked very, very promptly. And this we have to emphasize. How do we emphasize in our strategic plan that vector control products, any products, whatever ingredients they have, whatever specifications are mentioned, all the parameters should be checked by the laboratory which are accredited or approved by the government regulatory bodies. And then only your product should come out of the premises of the manufacturing unit. Performance of vector control intervention. This is another one. Durability of LLIN product. The whole two products for the adult control, LLIN and IRS, two strategy. LLIN, basically the whole philosophy of logistics maintenance cycle is supply and chain management. That in program, you have to see this is very, very important criteria that how frequently it should be replenished. Now, when you are trying to replenish, what is the year? So average year has been taken for 3 years durability. Whether your product is actually durable for 3 years or it is of its own, it is getting torn up in 2 years, 1.5 years. It is not able to stand till 3 years, then it is all waste. You have to replace more frequently. So you will land up in more kind of financial resource. That is how you have not planned it actually. So if you have not planned accordingly, your whole strategic plan for 5 years will be reduced to 2 years because you have not planned for replenishment. So this has to be checked up. This is very, very important when you are making your vector control planning. Residual efficacy of IR. Whatever product you are purchasing, whatever product you are supplying, whatever product you are using in the field, what is the residual efficacy? It is 6 weeks, it is 8 weeks. So if some product is efficacious for 6 weeks in the field, and somebody goes and say, no, your product after 8 weeks, I have seen that lot of mosquitoes. So either they are not fully aware about the product quality or you have not explained them. So all those things very clearly it should be brought in your strategic plan framing documents. Now, insecticide resistance. What is the frequency of insecticide resistance? What is the intensity? What is the status of insecticide resistance among the vectors, which I showed you just 3 maps of one of the states in India. So if the area is under the influence of 3 vectors, you have measured only insecticide resistance against 1 vector. So that will not give the correct evidence. So if you are using all the 3 vectors, you are putting all the 3 insecticide resistance status, you should do it. Now another which has come out, the latest guidelines that intensity monitoring and mechanism of the resistance, that you have to take help of some research bodies, because as on date in public health program, by and large, it is not very common to do the intensity bioassay test through using the WHO bottle assay. But if you involve the academic institutions, universities, the research organizations, either you have to support them from the program funding, or they have to generate their own funds, or they have to get some donor funding so that they monitor. And if they monitor, whether it is matching to your all sentinel sites and red hub sites, or they are just taking a patch up studies or some random studies with a separate design. So all those things will have to inbuilt component, you have to bring it in the strategic framework document when you are making a vector control plan. Species composition variations, I have already explained it, because there will be different area, ecological chain, ecological changes. This will give a different species composition variation, which we have to do for all these things. If there are variation in species composition, we have to understand about their dynamics, their biting, their feeding, their resting, then their responses against the different vectors, because If you take the LLIN, for example, your response of Culisiphasis will be different. Your response of Fruitalis, response of Minimus will be different. Simultaneously, the response of Bioma is very, very different. Because if they are outdoor feeder, outdoor biter, what is the response? You go and sit whole night and there is no dirus or Bioma comes. So then you will say that this area we have not seen any Bioma complex. But if you have understood the biodynamics, you will select some other particular pocket to study that what is the nighttime behavior, biting behavior of the Bioma complex, and how they are, if they are touching it, what is the response of the LLIN. So these are all basic points of tailoring vector control when you are trying to generate the evidences on, especially on the vector side, overall effectiveness of these interventions, changing times, this basically any alternatives you require or any supplementary intervention, you want to add anything, you want to cut short one or two vector control measures. So when you talk of integrated vector management, which is basically a decision-making process, you have got, say, 10 items, you are selecting 2, and you have been doing 5, you want to add more numbers, so you want to add 6 1. So that is all the entomological intelligence when you are doing, and then you have to track it systematically. Like you are following every case, track, test, track, and treat, T, or track them, treat them, test them, and treat them. Or first you test them, then treat them, and then track them as a follow-up measures. So all the 3 combinations in 3 different times, you have treated a patient, you want to track them. You have tested one patient, you want to treat them. So similarly here also, for vector species, you have to systematically track in one area or the other. Why are we referring all the old documents? Why? Because we are not generating enough evidences nowadays. The entomologists, they have to go to the field. They cannot sit in the lab. Basically, it is a field work. Entomology cannot be in the lab. So we have to generate the evidences, and that is what the first point of the title slide is, evidence-based generation. Without that, you have to take 10 years old data, 20 years old data, 30 years old data, and then your decision will be 30 years old basically on the database. That is not actually advisable. This slide is another important slide, though this slide is given for a different setting. But if you want to understand on the vector control planning, this is basically the process of case identification for malaria elimination, notification, investigation, and then focus investigation, and then response plan development. But if you break it and you want to understand on the role of entomology, the role of entomology will start here. When the case has been identified, detected on the surveillance, just 1 second. If the case has been identified and diagnosed because of any surveillance, this has been notified, this is being treated, it has been investigated properly. But when you have found out in and around that case, there may be some more cases. So if there are more cases, there are 1 case or 2 case or 3 case, definitely there is a transmission. There is a vector. Without vector, transmission is not possible. So then comes the role of entomologist, and then followed by the vector control. So during focus investigation, and that is why yesterday also I told the WHO that surveillance document, that when you are taking a focus investigation, entomologist has to be mandatorily a part of the focus investigation team. They have to investigate and they have to find out what is the determinants for this transmission. Whether it is a vector, parasite, species, stage, or congenial atmosphere, where they are hiding, what is the microclimate conditions, what are the social determinants. Social determinants, one very good example, if I want to give you here, that say for example, if primarily, say for example, Culisiphasis, primarily this is zoophilic mosquitoes. And if there are more number of cattle in and around the area human habitation, maximum number of species you will get in the cattle shed, because they are happy with the animal blood feed. So, but if cattle are not there, their need is to have the animal blood, so they will be diverted to the human being. So then you will get, and if they are attracted to a human being because of compulsion, what will happen? If they are infective, every bite will inoculate the parasite species, malaria parasite in our blood. So the transmission potential will go up. So this is one of the type of social determinant, that proximity of animal population with the human habitation, or distance between the animal population with this. And that is why if you see the old documents of 60s and 70s, there used to be three categories when you are doing the entomological surveillance: human dwelling, cattle sheds, and mixed dwelling. So if you are taking 4 human dwellings for a sample survey, you are taking 4 cattle sheds, you must take 2 mixed dwellings also, so that you get a rough idea of overall picture. So entomologist's role is very, very important in the focus investigation. There are many, many more examples on that. Based on that, the entomologist will develop a resource plan that, okay, look here there is in Balabacensis or Dirus, or now you call it as in Baimai complex. You don't require indoor spray because they are exophilic and exophagic mosquitoes. So you can save some resources if you are doing indoor spray. Why you can control it, that you have got only LLIN, whether they are using it. They cannot go with the mosquito net and move here and there, and they cannot go. But if they while they are sleeping in the jungles, they are sleeping in the forest area, if they are using the mosquito net, they are protecting themselves. They are trying to reduce the longevity of the mosquito. It may not be very, very practical for all those things, but to some extent, yes, it will be helpful. There are many other things which are coming up as a tools, innovative tools, but still they have to see the light in the program mode. So this is the basically why I wanted to show this slide, that this is very, very important. Though this whole slide is being referred in a different dimension, but we have to understand this because this is very important for us. Second point, which comes for the vector surveillance plan framework. Dr. Leo, should we continue,
Yes.
or should we break for 5-10 minutes?
I think it's time for a break. It depends how long your second session is, but we've been going for almost an hour now. So
Okay.
I think it would be helpful to uh, let's make it 10 minutes again, then people can have a
Okay.
good stretch. Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
everyone, please try and be back in 10 minutes, and we can look forward to another great instructive session from Dr. Pradeep. Thank you, Dr. Pradeep. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
our audience members. See you in 10 minutes' time. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Leo, sir.
वो चले गए जोशी जी?
हाँ सर,
बायो
कैसे हो? अरे
बायो ब्रेक कर दिया है ना, बायो ब्रेक कर दिया है.
हाँ, bio break. Yes, sir. Bio break. Sir, yesterday I should go for one important meeting. Otherwise, I have tried to attend, but there's some problem. And now voluntary, that is, he has made a very good today. No problem.
कोई बात नहीं, आप लोग आ जाते हैं, मेरा मॉरल बूस्टअप हो जाता है.
अरे नहीं, मजा आता है हमको भी सर. This is a continuous education, medical education, particularly for vector-borne disease, entomology.
Hello, good morning all.
Good morning, good morning.
Good
मतलब
morning, madam.
वहाँ ब्रेक क्या हो गया, यहाँ हिंदी शुरू हो गए.
This is bio break. This is biological break.
Break is enjoying moment.
चलो रियल बायो ब्रेक लेके आते हैं.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
morning.
Sasi is there. Dr. Sasi, how are you?
Fine, sir. Fine, sir.
Yes. Very good.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Dr. Pradeep, may we distract you from your otherworldly activities there? Yes. So I think, like me, our audience is looking forward to some additional messages of wisdom from you. We're
Yes, yes,
tapping into your wisdom. May I ask our audience members, please remember to put yourself on mute if you don't mind. And may I also ask your questions? Any questions you have, please pop them into the Q&A box, not the chat box. Chat is fine, that's excellent. But we're going to monitoring the Q&A box for questions for Dr. Pradeep to respond to. So thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Pradeep. Back to you, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Leo. Let us come back and resume the session. So another important component which we have been discussing, that is on the vector surveillance planning, having understood about the vector surveillance, entomological surveillance, and this. Then when we plan the vector surveillance,
You are not share screening, Dr. Pradeep?
it is not shared.
No.
Oh my God.
Screen is not shared. Yeah.
One second. Maybe after the break it is.
Dr. Pradeep, share screen down in the middle.
I'm saying.
If you really hit a problem, Dr. Pradeep, we can ask. Oh, there we go. You've got it. Excellent. Back on track. Thank you.
Okay. So here we were. Now, when we want to have the vector surveillance plan, where we stopped before the break, we should again have the clear concept, the framework, which yesterday we have discussed in detail. Somebody's screen is on. So, clear-cut concept, what exactly we want to put in the framework. What are we have got choice as a core vector control intervention. In that core vector control intervention, we have to target about the vector control measures. We have to get the larval control measures. We have to be very, very well prepared for the outbreak, epidemic preparedness, and our response. That precisely it is an outbreak containment, and whether they fits in our policy and resources, which we have been discussing and we have to discuss now. Now, vector surveillance, basically, we should have the concept of what kind of surveillance. Many people, they ask this question that we don't have the entomologists, we don't have the experts, how to do it surveillance. So let us first understand that what kind of surveillance is primarily categorized for for malaria elimination process. We always have the first round preliminary or baseline survey. This is very, very important. If it is not done, we may not have the proper selection of the site. Sometimes it is done in hurry-burry based on the historical data or previous data if we don't have the adequate measures to do this kind of preliminary survey. The second one is our routine sentinel survey. So once we fix up, we get an idea on the vector abundance, vector influence, then we select the sites which is representative. I'm coming to that. So then there we conduct routinely sentinel survey, and that routine we have to fix up according to our own resource feasibility and our own operational convenience. And then information spot check. Spot check, or we say ad hoc assessment, that suddenly we go in some area and we do not have any data, so we do assessment, quick assessment. That is, this information is actually intermittently we collect. Sometimes we go, sometimes we do not go, or sometimes regularly we say the word that irregularly regular. So we fix up some timings according to our own resources, that okay, we will do it on 6 monthly or 4 monthly or 3 monthly. So like that, we sometimes we fix up, and for that we should fix up spot check sites. Sometimes the spot check sites are fixed, sometimes they are changing every time whenever we go, to have a broader feel of that particular area. Then, as I have been telling, that whenever there is a case, there is a foci detected, and that foci has to be investigated properly, that basically what was the reason. So this information is required immediately, because you want to resolve, to issue and liquidate that particular foci, so that I mean, you don't allow to establish the transmission. So it is basically on prevention of re-establishment. So the foci detected must be liquidated immediately. So these are basically 4 ties we are more bothered about this. When we go for preliminary or baseline survey, why this initiated? This is initiated basically, we go to the area which is having a vacuum, or we don't have we don't have the recent data. So in a time limited manner, we plan our survey, gather all the things collections, and what information we have to collect? We have to collect the information about the vectors, its resting behavior, its feeding habits. So those parameters which will come for density, outdoor, indoor, space spray collections, then resting collections, then feeding, biting collections, landing collections. I will answer that question. Somebody has raised that human landing is not allowed. So feeding habits, then changes in the species composition. In some season, what is the trend analysis? Some seasons the Culicifaces appear, some seasons Fluidalis appears, some season some other vector species appears. So this, in terms of time and space, that is very, very important. So these are the things which we but in a very, very limited time frame we do this study, we initiate this study. What kind of breeding sources? We have to do the mapping of the breeding sources, that what kind of breeding is allowed, whether what is the breeding habitat. So this is basically habitat locations, and then whether these habitats are actually occupied, or they are actually, there is a breeding of the larval breeding is there or not. So they are receptive, but whether actually breeding is going on or not. Then we measure it as a larval density in this thing. Then vector susceptibility is when you go to that area, if you are getting adequate number of mosquitoes, though ideally it should be on F1 generation as per the recommendations, WHO recent recommendations, but sometimes you don't get. From the field point of view, you do collect the mosquitoes, and you collect the full fed mosquito, allow them to rest for some time so they become half fed, and then you make the test with that. So field caught mosquitoes are also allowed, and that was already given in old WHO documents, that in case you don't have this facility in the field conditions, you can always go for. So that will give an idea what is the response of the vector against the insecticides which are being used in the program. In addition to that, there are also information on local lecture species, which is very, very important, which is needed for the currently for the elimination strategy. You have to correlate with the earlier data, historical data. So you will know that in this particular area, what is there any difference which has come, and that will basically a environmental effect or ecological effect. They have changed their biology and behavior. Then all these data which are collected, this will give a direction that now you have to do routine survey. So where exactly, which particular village, which particular area, you have to fix up your sites, sentinel sites. So based on this, total preliminary round of survey or baseline survey, you are not selecting any site which actually without any evidence based, without any data generation based, so that where you are finding adequate number of vector mosquitoes. So you will fix up the sentinel site there, and this area becomes a representative of this particular locality. I'll give you an example of that. That in one of the district which has got three type of eco terrain. One is on the plain area, which is just on the seashore. The area, then there is a tribal belt which is on little hillock side, and in between the sea belt and hillock side there is a in between there is a plain area, but it is basically an undulating terrain where people are living. This is also again a tribal dominated valley. So you get three types of rather four types. There is another side of the same district, it is a valley. So you are likely to get four kinds of mosquitoes. See, the down below you will get Culicephasis stephensii, and I am talking of one very important town in Andhra Pradesh earlier. This is Visakhapatnam town, where you get the sea coastal area where you have got a steel plant. Then you get on the upper area, which is a tribal dominated. First you get a little hillock side, and then you go on the top of the hills, which is the Paderu hill tribals. And then on the other side, you get the Arku Valley. This is valley side. So there you get the Varuna and Fluveteles. This side you get Culicephasis and Annularis. This side you get stephensii more predominantly on the sea coastal side where there is industrial township completely. So you get all four kinds of mosquitoes, three primary and two secondary vectors. You have to devise another kind of state. So how many sentinel sites you will have? In this particular situation, you require three minimum, one for the plain area, one for the hillock side, and one for the valley side. So this kind of preliminary survey will give you the direction where exactly what kind of sentinel sites you are going to fix. Once you go for this, complete the preliminary baseline survey, then you can go for routine sentinel surveys. Routine sentinel survey, it is basically you fix up for a long term, seeing the trend. If in program you don't call it as a study, the program you call it as a routine monitoring for a long term monitoring or a short term monitoring. So long term monitoring or long term study, if you are planning at definite frequency, you have to fix the frequency. What is your kitty? How much funds you have got, either from the donor agency or from the government agency or from the public-private model or from the academic or research institution or some self-generating schemes, who is supporting. So how much you can travel, how frequently you can travel. You can travel monthly, that's the best. You can travel quarterly, that is also good. If you cannot do it, you have to, that is your compulsion. You have to collect the data only on annual basis. But then based on the preliminary survey, you can fix up the locations, as I gave you the example. And every time you go there, and that will give a trend analysis completely. The chart which I showed on the first, the transmission intensity, that transmission dynamics. So you will monitor on monthly basis or fixed interval basis, whatever time you get, you have to monitor that on the long-term planning. This will give what kind of data? This will give the change in vector density, seasonality, fluctuation. This will give the total composition when you do the space spray collection. It will give a proportion of the vector species that particular in that area. What is the total overall vector composition in comparison to other mosquito species? Plus, it will give what is the percentage of the vector population in this particular month or this particular collection time or this particular season. Then what is their behavior? You can also study the behavior at regular interval, whether you have collected from animal shelter, you have collected from human dwellings, you have collected from mixed dwelling. You can also study their blood mean analysis. So it will give you so many parameters you can do. So feeding behavior will come. Its biting behavior will come. If you are like human landing is not allowed in many of the by and large globally, because of actually human landing and human bait collections were not allowed for the dengue virus and inoculation purposes, because it's very, very different. And then in malaria also we are allowing. So what you do? You are taking animal weight collection or you are doing trap collections. So in the whole night, hourly basis, if you are collecting the mosquitoes, you know that what time the mosquito, peak mosquito density comes per trap, per night collection or per room per night collection, something like that. You have to do it. So that's all given in entomological parameters very much in detail. So the behavior, feeding behavior, blood mean analysis, resting, biting, frequency, every time thing you can study with this. You can also study one very important parameter, daily survival, which is basically at the proximate last it will come in the impact monitoring. Susceptibility test you can do from the more number of mosquitoes you can collect, and you can do the resistance monitoring with the WHO tube test. If you want to study, because see, basic difference of the tube test and intensity test was because earlier the whole concept was that you have to correlate with the data of tube test resistance status with the epidemiological data. If it is giving that the insecticide which you are using, if it is giving in spite of the resistance found in the tube test, if you are getting epidemiological impact, you can continue. That was the earlier guidelines. But now, if epidemiological data will not be there much because of low number of cases, so how do you monitor it? Even in that case, if your epidemiological trend is given for the entire block, the lowest unit is PHC or subcenter, whereas you are collecting mosquito from one particular site, one particular village. So whether this is properly correlating with that particular area representing or not, this becomes a problem. Intensity test will tell that first you do with 5 times extra doses, then 10 times extra doses. So if with the tube test comparison, if you have increased the dose 5 times, if you increase the dose 10 times, then even if the resistance comes, then there is a confirmed resistance. You need to change now the insecticide. That is what the help has been provided by this intensity test. But if the bottle test, intensity test through the bottle bioassay, if it is not able, we have to take the help of the academic institutions or the research institutions in the for the program, so that we generate some kind of documentary evidences. This is very, very important for your transmission dynamics. Entomological surveillance establishment sites, you have to select not only single criteria. You have to select multiple criteria. 2 or 3 I have already told. 1, the abundance of the vector. 2, representative for the ecotypes, representative for the different areas. The site should be properly representative. And in case, I'll come to that later, if in case it is required later on also in certain situations, certain given the transmission intensity, you have to reallocate the sites or you have to take additional sites. That is very, very important, because ultimately whatever data you are generating, whatever evidence you are generating, you have to have. So all these things, this is a physical activity, and this physical activity should be properly spelled out in your draft document, strategic plan document. And with this physical activity, the financial implication should be worked out. This is important. That will come in the 4th day class. Third one is the spot check or ad hoc assessment. Sometimes what you do, you suddenly we are asked to go and we don't have any data. So when we go for this assessment, we go. So immediately in selected locations as a supplement routine measures, we try to put our entomological team and collect some data, some information on the vector prevalence, vector abundance, vector density. If it is more, we can conduct the susceptibility test also, so vector behavior, or sometimes in the night time or morning time, indoor, outdoor. So vector behavior pattern, sometimes all the blood meal analysis we do. So we know the feeding pattern also, that there are these mosquitoes which are present there. They are anthropophilic or they are zoophilic primarily. They are taking more human blood or they are taking more animal blood. So all those behaviors and biodynamics portion, whatever feasible, we do study in our ad hoc assessment site. Then the last one which comes, the spot check sites, you generate more data. You generate more data on this additional information you generate along with your routine surveillance sites. That is very, very important that you are generating some data on sentinel sites when you are going on routine, but in and around if spot check sites you are doing, and if you are not getting, you are changing your spot check sites or random sites. So what happens? You generate more data in and around that locality so that you get more representative samples. For example, I give you one example that if you are having one site and every month you are changing your spot check sites for a longitudinal study. So today you have collected, I mean, every month you are going for one particular sentinel sites. Then in that particular sub-center, you are selecting one village. There are 5 villages. So what happens if one spot check site you have fixed, you will get only the data from the 2 places. But this one spot check site, if you are rotating 1, 2, 3, 4. So for another 4 months, you will get one fixed site and 3 random sites from this area. So the entire sub-center, you will get a full idea. This was more practiced during lymphatic filariasis elimination when we were doing microfilaria survey in the night time. So in and around sentinel sites, we used to rotate the change the random sites, spot check sites, so that you get the idea. And during the 5 years or 6 years time, you get 5 in one district, 5 sentinel sites, but 30 random sites in and around. So you get a feel of the whole district. And that is what will help in the vector abundance in this. But sentinel sites is always fixed. If you have to change the sentinel sites, you have to give proper justification, but you can always reallocate in different situation once you are entering to the from pre-elimination to elimination sites. That I will come later little. Now spot check sites, you have to do another work that this will give your first thing is that receptive area. Any area you go, whether you are taking sentinel sites, you are doing preliminary survey, you are going spot check site. First thing you see that whether the area is receptive. If it is receptive, yes, you have to start your work. If the area is not receptive, yesterday I showed you one stratification that you will initially you will find receptive and non-receptive stratification. Then in the receptive area, you will do, then you will get some cases where active transmission is going on, somewhere its transmission is not going. Then in active transmission, there are some foci which has been cleared, some foci. So in any area for vector surveillance also, you have to clear the concept that in any area, the area is receptive. Then whether there is a reintroduction, if the area is receptive, whether the vector which is already prevalent or abundance of the vector or this area was under the influence of say Culissifasis, whether the area is now under influence of Culissifasis or Stephensi, whether the area is now under the influence of Culissifasis or Fluidalis, whether any other vector has invaded in that vector area. So these are the area like we talk of the South African horns, the Stephensi invasion. Earlier it was not there. So this has come as a result of entomological intelligence and entomological surveillance output only. Otherwise, nobody would have bothered about that. Then the second is it will also give the information, the spot check sites studies that vulnerability. What is the population movement? What is the migratory population? What kind of resettlement? What kind of industrial setup? Is there any mining work is going on? Is there any infrastructural development project is coming up? So whether the area is becoming or changing towards high risk because of this kind of migratory population or resettlement colonies. So what is the, and then if that is the case, you have to see what is the land border, what is the air border, what is the seaport, what is the border area, what is the transportation route. So how these things are actually these populations are moving, or this is a land border, porous border where there is not much check, so people are just filtering into and coming up after doing settlement. So wherever they will get their bread and butter, they will try to settle it. And on humanitarian ground, different government, they are allowing them at different level with the different conditions. But for health purposes, for malaria purposes, this becomes a very big problem for all of us. So we have to monitor it. So this is spot check surveillance. This includes those components, and these components should be reflected in strategic plan document. Now, focus investigation also, yesterday we have discussed a lot on this. The focus investigation area, first is that area. Whether your area which you have identified as a focus for transmission, whether this is because of as an outcome of one imported case in the low endemic area or in the zero transmission zone, or this focus is persistently, it's persisting for a long time, or this is because of some sudden outbreak of malaria which has happened in that particular area. So these 3-4 situations you should have in your mind so that it can go along with that when you are drafting the document. Then what is the purpose you should mention? Focus investigation means you have found out one focus of malaria transmission. It means your earlier actions, implementation activities were not effective. Why they were not effective? Whether quality was good, bad. Quality means quality control of the product, quality check, or quality of the services from both sides, from the service providers or from the recipient side. So all the areas, whether how it was affecting, where there was a deficiency. So you have to understand that and you have to check that. This focus investigation, foci you have found, this is basically it is a short-term survey, short-term investigation. It should be completed within a very spelled out, time-bound manner, and it is always reactive. Focus investigation is done only when focus is identified. So it is basically a reactive. You cannot have proactive focus investigation. And then one is reactive, and second aim is that it should be able to prevent the re-establishment. So it should continue till you are ensuring that you are able to prevent. And that is what in the first day you slide, if you see, what is the outcome? The one chart which vector control output we showed, green color chart. Prevented re-establishment. The strategy is prevention of re-establishment. The policy is prevention of re-establishment. But your outcome is prevented the re-establishment. And that is what is here. That your focus investigation should be able to suggest that these actions will prevent the re-establishment, which is triggered by always increase in, that's what is reactive, increase in prevalence or clinical cases. That is why you identify the case. And so this is focus investigation is reactive because of an outcome of the surveillance, parasitological surveillance or reporting of the cases. Now, another important point when you are talking of vector control is precisely you have to make a group of whatever entomological parameter, whatever things you want to do in vector surveillance. All the, I have told you 26, 27 parameters for malaria, and then total if you take all other vector-borne diseases like malaria, filariasis, JE, Kala-Azar, dengue, chikungunya, it becomes all around almost 32 or 33. Now, if you look for malaria elimination, when we are talking of we are going for species composition, occurrence, density, which group it will be, what it leads? It leads adult vector composition. So you are monitoring an adult vector composition. In that you have got 3 primary parameters. You can see for species, you can see for the density, you can see for the species composition, and you can see for the occurrence of this species, what seasonality and all those things. Then the second one is vector behavior, the adult vector behavior. Adult vector behavior group, the parameters which are included in that, human blood index, that is based on the blood mean analysis. The second one is human biting rate, which is not allowed actually nowadays, HBR, but you can have another landing rate collections either on the cattle or so minus you can do in a different way. You can find out that what is the timings for that. So instead of human biting rate, we can have the landing collections of the mosquito. So mosquito biting time basically. Biting time will give the, if you break up in 6 to 7, 7 to 8, the whole night, if you do hourly collection, so you will know the biting period. Otherwise, if you don't collect these parameters, You will always depend that old literature, that what is the biting time of Stephensi, what is the biting time of Culissifaces, what is the biting time of Minimus, what is the biting time of say the Maculatus group. So these are all the things which you have to generate. Then location, biting area, you are fixing some trap outdoor, some trap indoors, some exit in entry trap. So many things you are putting up. You are doing CDC light trap, you are doing weighted traps. So what kind of which area you are getting more number of mosquitoes, and then resting locations. So your collection yield is basically from the indoor, outdoor, or different or mixed dwellings or the cattle sheds. So you can say that where the what is the resting location, preferred resting locations. The another is parameters what we collect is the resistance monitoring. We monitor frequency, status, we monitor intensity, biosay, we monitor the mechanism of the resistance. This you can separately group into adult vector resistance monitoring. Though there is a larval resistance monitoring, but precisely on direct impact is adult vector resistance monitoring, except in urban areas where we do for the larval resistance monitoring and we use lot of larvicides. Another parameter what we do for the breeding sites mapping, then you do the habitat monitoring, you do the larval density monitoring if they are occupied, so that you can group into aquatic habitats. Then the important parameters which are done later on, if you are collecting more number of mosquitoes, especially in the area which you want to claim now for you have achieved the elimination. So what is your sporozoite rate? Means you do dissect the mosquitoes or you incriminate it and you try to see it, whether you are doing with the manual dissection or you are doing with PCR technology. So you just check it up, the sporozoite, I mean infectivity rate in the mosquitoes. And then in entomological inoculation rate. Entomological inoculation rate is not a very easy parameter to be calculated by the program personnel, because it is something like that, your Garrett and Jones formula, usually commonly called McDonald formula, the vectorial capacity and entomological inoculation rate. These are all basically a mathematical modeling and outcome product of the longevity, the survival rate, the per day mosquito bite, and then how much one person can transfer the cases from primary case to so many cases. So this is a little difficult, but then this has to be made easy, and people are working on that how this EIR can be simplified. Receptivity is very easy to see, but very difficult to define a receptivity index. So far, the 23, there has been a paper publication on the receptivity. But so far, the WHO, I mean, there is no general guidance on the receptivity index, which I heard that I discussed some of my friends in WHO. They are still working out, and so last year also it was told that maybe within a year it may come. So maybe we are expecting that it will come. These sporozoite rate precisely, or receptivity or inoculation rate, we have to group in the proxies of transmission, because if you want to establish that this area is transmission free, you should not have a sporozoite rate. That is number one. You should not have case, you should not have sporozoite rate. If there is no case and mosquitoes with sporozoite rate, means somewhere we are lacking our surveillance. We could not find a case, because otherwise how the sporozoite will come in the vector mosquitoes if there is no gametocide prevailing in the area. So if the surveillance is not there properly, and that is why the MSAT, the mass screening and treatment, was recommended by WHO, especially in the low endemic area, so that we do not get all these things and we detect the asymptomatic carriers and gametocide carriers. The whole entomological concept is very important. One important point, that all these indicators should never be clubbed for multiple vectors in totality in a group. You should have all these parameters should be calculated separately for vectors. Say, for example, Culissifaces, all these things should be given separately. All these things should be given separately for fluid. So you should not say that malaria vector resistance status is like this. We should always say that resistance status against delta methrin for culicifacis is this. Resistance, fluvidalis is resistant to this extent. Culicifacis is resistant. So that's what our meaning was. Now coming to the vector control, what is the policy for vector core intervention? So as per WHO and many of the countries they have allotted, what they have said that vector control core component of malaria elimination prevention is one is insecticide treated nets or LLIN. They call LLIN insecticide treated nets, they have put one. So long lasting insecticidal nets is one of the core strategy for adult vector control for malaria prevention. The second one is very, very important, indoor residual spray, which we have been using since decades. In fact, very, very, very primary thing is this invention of DDT raised this indoor residual spraying of insecticide. And we have achieved a lot of success with this. Somehow we could not sustain. One reason is resistance, one reason is complacency, one reason is quality spray, one reason is new compounds are coming up with it. So, and another reason is infrastructure development and development progress. So indoor residual spraying has always been a very, very important. So this is also again included as a core intervention as per WHO manual also. Larval source management, somehow for malaria, it has been given as a supplementary measures. So to me, we are actually neglecting. WHO says very nicely that larval source management should be an option where you can fix the breeding sites, you can find them easily, and you can treat them. So they are fixed, findable, and this is feasible. You can do it. But you know, we did one mistake in 50s when our whole program of eradication, whole world, it revolved around rural malaria. What has happened? There was no guidelines for urban malaria. And when urban malaria came into existence, when Stephen's problem arose, then entire things with the dynamics of the Stephen's, everybody started thinking, and especially in India, when we refer 71, we started an urban malaria scheme. We learned from filaria control program, which was there in 1955 onwards with the larval treatment. We learned from old malaria program, 1902 and other places, where we have been doing this as a primarily source reduction and larval source management. But with the advent of DDT, when many of the countries, they started malaria eradication program or malaria control program, we neglected urban control area. And that is why the entire strategy was with indoor residual spray. It got its own priority, but it got always secondary priority larval source. There is one basic reason on larval source management, because rural countries where a lot of agriculture area is there, lot of low socio-economic group is there, lot of breeding grounds are there. So what happened? Larval source management is very costly affair. If you are starting treating with this chemical larvicide. So you have to, that is how it is restricted. But it should, my only personal feeling is that it should not be a supplementary measure. It should be also one of the core intervention measures in specific areas. This is very, very important. The only problem with the LLIN is what WHO says, that we should always have pyrethroid long-lasting nets are only available. There is no other compound which has come with the long-lasting net, and the product should be pre-qualified by WHO. But when you go for this pre-qualified by WHO as recommended as per the technical guidance of WHO, if your country has got the capacity to make it its own and with the standard maintained of the WHO, you can always have, whether it is a pre-qualified or it does not go for pre-qualification and get the certification, that is up to the country regulatory authorities. But this is very important that you maintain the quality of the product, match the standard, and then get it pre-qualified certificate or take a decision accordingly. Similarly, for IRS also WHO said that the product should be WHO pre-qualified. There are many products. There are after DDT has been banned, phased out, there are many products. BSC was banned long back, 97, and then now DDT has also been phased out. There are many products in organophosphorus. There are many products in synthetic pyrethroids which are recommended for this. There are many products now in carbamate group also which are coming. There are new products which are coming like neonicotinoids and sinusoid, but it has to see again the light in the program mode, because program mode institutional mechanism has to prevail for different countries in a different way. Some of the countries, they follow neighboring countries' rules and neighboring countries' situation if they are carved out of some countries later on. So they are in the process of standardizing their own standard. But sometimes, and many of the countries, they follow straightway WHO. But for India, we have very stringent and very robust system of institutional mechanism with the regulatory authorities of the country. Now, this also, if you want to group the core vector control interventions, indoor residual spray and long-lasting insecticide, they are coming into the adult control. The source reduction, larvivorous phase, biolarvicides, chemical larvicides, insect growth regulators, these are all coming under the larval source management. Health Act and building bylaws, they are also a part of supporting to larval source management. Basically, these are all punitive actions. They are all penalty imposing. There are legal measures which are taken against the defaulters, repeated defaulters who are creating the breeding sites. So for non-creation of breeding sites, so sustenance of the area as a mosquito-free area or breeding-free area, mosquito breeding-free area, you have to be very, very alert, watchful that because of your any actions, mosquito breeding is not created, and because of that mosquito breeding is not created, you come back to that. Then there is another group, outbreak containment, fogging, which is very, very common in this particular region, indoor residual spraying or focal spray. This is outbreak containment measures. Though WHO very categorically for malaria elimination, they do not recommend the fogging, but many of the countries they are doing. And it has helped in outbreak containment as well. Provided it is done properly with the proper expertise, with the proper involvement. We have done in our whole life, we have been doing, we have been resorting to the outdoor fogging, indoor fogging, space spray, whenever we have gone for outbreak containment, and we have resolved many of the outbreak containments practically. Now, supplementary intervention for larval sightings, the few fixed and findable, this is WHO, which I have told, because this is not cost effective feasibility study, but in certain areas, and if you are taking integrated approach along with the integrated with the disease control, different vector-borne diseases, especially on the Aedes-borne diseases, you are taking the larvicidal measures, so you are expanding your horizons, not only the towns which are reporting only malaria or reporting towns only with the Culex transmitted lymphatic filariasis. Now you are taking more number of towns which are earlier free. Now they are actually coming under the influence of Aedes, Albopictus aegypti. So you have got three kinds of groups where there is only malaria, there is only lymphatic filariasis in urban settings, or there is a dengue, or there is a overlapping of dengue, lymphatic filariasis, malaria. You are bound to have the anti-larval operation, source reduction operation. So larval source management will be your compulsion. So you have to add it. You have to load this idea into your strategic planning. How much it is feasible, how much it is within your resources, that is very, very important. Different settings if you want to take, what is this vector control? The first one, if you see the larval source management, prevention and control of breeding, you have to have the environmental manipulation. What are the draining the water, covering water storage containers? You are cutting the mosquitoes to see the water to come to the contact so that they cannot lay the eggs. You are cleaning a weekly basis, your flower pots, vases, you are cleaning your incidental water collections by mistakes. You are managing your construction sites, rooftops, when they are curing with the water they are using. Then you are also using your punitive actions, defaulters, managing discarded, which are plenty nowadays, filling up the tree holes. This is one environmental measures. Then construction site, inside, outside, over the construction, residential area for workers where they are actually agglomerated. There is a collection of so many laborers, congregations, they are temporary resettlement colonies. So there is a lot of water collections, temporary shops and sheds near the construction. They collect plenty of water in the different kinds of receptacles that needs to be helpful for the mosquito breeding, and that has to be taken care of. This is for the larval breeding controls. The adult controls, you have to do the quality IRS. Your LLIN has to have the universal access coverage, 100%, not even one. No interference of anyone. If the area is to be covered with LLIN, even 2 houses are not covered with LLIN, malaria will not go from that area. Focus on vulnerable groups and receptive areas, especially in the hospital area, in inpatient area, receptive area where the people are coming, settling temporarily. You should have some extra bed nets process, or they should have of their own arrangement. Then that will come with the IEC activities. Then process and preparedness for monitoring. You should be so much watchful that even one case need to be investigated. So your monitoring has to be very, very stringent and reporting. Then accordingly, all these parameters, when you are putting in your document framing strategic plan, every activity has to be added with the financial testing, and that only comes. Then only you can come narrow down your local plan. So you have to protect from the mosquito bite. In that, you can do the community participation and your vector surveillance unit, because there are many times the question is asked, where are the entomologists? Where are the vector control experts? So you have to establish it, and you have to flag it with the justification, and you have to put a financial implication for that. If you are reaching to the elimination target, you are nearing the elimination. So what you should do? You should divide now the area, because there will be phased manner. Since yesterday I've been taking from 400, 500 to 10, then 100, and 10, and the 1. So when you are making, you should divide the area. You should stratify, go on amending the maps. Then prioritize your area with the high burden under the influence of multiple vector, then single vector. Whatever tools you have, you should available, and you focus. Where should you focus? You should focus the area where you are getting indigenous transmission. The another area where you have already eliminated, you are expecting migratory population. The area where your township is coming, or aggregation of labor for infrastructure development, any industry, any factory, any aggregation of labors, or the ecosystem is changing, somewhere forest land, somewhere the agricultural land is being converted into the farming, or you will be being the construction with the multi-storied building, you immediately should focus. So your area fragmentation, stratification should be there, so that you can always have these 3-4 strategy groups with so many compounds in hand and so many options in hand you should have. Plus, you should have social mobilization and bylaws. I have already told you that will help you. For that, you have to have the If you don't have the legal measures, you should copy somewhere and then try to get into your enforce. You should get it approved. You should get it, make it as a law provision, so that they are able to be penalized if they are repeatedly making the default. That's what I'm telling. The IBM has never been a magic bullet. It's malaria elimination is also not a magic bullet. It is everyone's responsibility. We have to share the problem. Even if somebody is complaining, please don't take it as a complaint. Take it as a suggestion. Take it as a helpful person where your person was not able to reach. You have got some information. Now your job, one step becomes easier. You are not going to investigate, and you are only going to see the cause. When you are investigating, your one step is gone. Surveillance portion is solved if you are getting some information, either through media or through some individual information. So appreciate it. Go there, and do the service. Then use insecticide judiciously, and you should always have the SOP like this thing and try to flare up that what are the pros and cons of the indiscriminate use. So especially for the fogging operations which they are using, I just gave one example in the beginning that people should not use indiscriminately just to satisfy some people. It is recommended for the outbreak containment in our country, in many countries. If it is not recommended, please do not use insecticide without any justified reasons. So everybody should be allowed to protect themselves from the mosquito bite, and their community participation will play a role. Ultimately, this strategy what was given for focus intervention, preliminary, primary survey, routine survey, sentinel survey, spot check survey, then focus investigation. Focus investigation, one very, very important point, if you are following 137 strategy. What is 137 strategy? China started adopting malaria elimination. One means all malaria cases should be reported within 1 day. So your surveillance system and your reporting system should be so vigilant, so strong that you get within 1 day all the malaria cases. I mean, malaria cases will be reported only when it is identified, it is traced, it is detected, and it is reported by the evening. Then 3 means all reported cases, whatever you have gone, 1, 3, 10, 20, whatever it is, lab confirmed cases, it should be investigated, case investigation, whether it is indigenous, whether it is imported, whether it is introduced, whether it is new, whatever, what kind of this is. So the case investigation should be done, and along with that, the foci should be marked. 7 means all within 7 days, all foci should be surveyed, and the response means whether you want to give treatment, whether you want to give radical treatment, whether you want to give preventive measures, whether you want to treat with LLIN, insecticide, whatever you want to do, you finish it within 7 days. That is what is given in the right side, that focus investigation vector data. It will help in that if you have done earlier that foci, the moment you land up, you see our entomological data earlier, what you have collected. Okay, this area, yes, this area is under three vector influence, or this area is only one. So it is our job becomes little easier, and immediately you do whatever according to this data, and that time also you can collect, so you can match is there anything new added or nothing, and then you take all the response mechanism. This is very, very important. Outbreak management requires emergency action, so you should always have this thing in mind that when you are taking vector management as an outbreak response, it's an emergency. By all means, you have to contain the outbreak. It should not be allowed to flare up. You make immediately. COVID, everybody knows that containment zone, but we have read this containment zone long back. Whenever we used to go for outbreak containment, we used to make 3 rounds of this circle immediately by hand, that within 1 kilometer of range, that is the effective flight range, then total flight range within 3-kilometer range, and then 5-kilometer range. We used to make three circles. So immediately we will start working. We will start attacking on this inner side, and then we will start telling other people to come from the outer periphery, so that you attack from the both sides. Don't allow the spread of the disease beyond this the flight range of the mosquitoes. So that is very, very important. For that, you have got immediately you have to do focal spraying, for fogging. Fogging should continue. Then you should, till that time, you manage for IRS, whatever it is there, focal spraying in and around 50 houses, and then you switch over. Fogging slowly you reduce, initially regular daily, then you should do twice in a week, then you do fortnightly. By the time your emergency situation will be under control, all the infected mosquitoes will be brought down, knocked down, and then those things are within the control. And simultaneously you go on doing your mass survey, so that you will know that yes, the parasite load has gone down, or the people who are suffering, there are now new cases are not coming up. That is what is the basically outbreak containment measures. Then these things, when you draft in the document, you should work out in your area what is the policy, whether these policies exist. I'll just give few names of this policy. What is your goal target? What is your vision? What is your commitment? Whether you have got political commitments? Yes, you do have. Whether you have got administrative commitment, then your regulatory mechanism. What is your policy departments which are making there? There may be different agriculture policy, there may be environment policy, there may be tourism policy, that how many tourists are coming, which area, how they are protected, whether they have got anything measures, mosquito protection or vector protection or disease protection measures in their policy embedded. If it is not there, how can you best suggest them? And that is what is the intersectoral collaboration when you want to make. So first you have to go through all these policy, whatever existing. It may be little more because there are 20 countries with the AppMan, so maybe more. So there are many more international health regulation, whatever regulatory bodies and policies are there. Please try to get get it and try to read it and then try to incorporate whatever you want to add. This is the time when you have to make in a strategic plan that yes, this is very important. Based on those things, you make your plan. What is your background? What is your justification? What is your situation analysis? You are making for a 5 years till 27. What are the activities, objective, what resources you require, what will be role, TOR, what will be the role for different stakeholders, different people, implementers, till the communities you go. And then basically what is the norms? Then you go for this norms, what will be your requirement when you are making resource planning, how many human resource you require, how many you have, how many additional you want, what are the gaps, how to fill up, what is the immediate requirement, what is the long-term requirement, I mean, immediately you require for 6 months this particular year or 3 months or 4 months on the next year, how much you require. Then slowly you want to reduce it in the fag end of this. So all these things, and then you make a calendar of activity roadmap. Yearly, what are the broader activity you are doing? 2022, what is your output? What is your outcome expected and what your inputs? Then on monthly calendar of activity, you make what are you going to do in January? What are you going to do in February? What are you going to do in March, like that? And then if you do not get this, you have an option of pooling of resources. You've got plenty of vector control experts who have retired or who are ready to serve. There are many working in the academic institutions, universities, research organizations. Some are able or shifted to some different departments. Like I'll give you one example. Whenever there is a war in the army, there is a provision you can call the retired officers for this, for the safety and security of the country. So you can also have this kind of system in this situation. So these are the basic points in situation analysis. Vector-borne disease is endemic. What are the cases occurring? What are the risks of infection? Whether there is a disease is alone or it is a co-endemic with any other disease. What are the difference of disease risk in different geographical area within your purview? What are the vectors responsible? What is the transmission dynamics and what are their biodynamics? This is the situation analysis, technical, managerial, and implementation failure and human behavior. This I have already explained. You have to justify the logistics is very important, and supply chain management, any capacity where you are lacking. So basically what is there, WHO says in one of the document, improve the capacity and capability. Capacity of the human resource to deliver the good, capability of the system, whether the system is capable of delivering whatever you are planning. So if there are not, you have to identify overall gap analysis and then try to bridge those gaps. That is what is very immediate. And if there is an implementation failure, what will be the output? What will be result of suboptimal treatment compliance? What will be output of suboptimal surveillance failure? What will be insecticidal spray if it is suboptimal? I mean, LLIN coverage is not universal. It is not user 100% rate, 98% rate. Absolutely, there are risk assessments. So this similarly for human behavior, whether what is their perception first about this disease, what they are, whether they are willing to support to some extent, and if they are willing, try to assess their feelings and then try to divide the work accordingly. Bring them at one platform. So bringing many stakeholders at one platform, you can't dictate that okay, you do this, you do this. You assess, it is your baby, you have to assess and tell them, see, because of this, you have to work on this. So that is one idea which I just, and that is what is the basically managerial approach which you have. Identify the determinants. This is another important thing. These are all the highlights of the whole PPT, that you have to see the population density in your area, socio-economic condition. Then when you are talking of environment, there was a question, environment, how does it affect? Elevations, land use. If you take the example of Bhutan, if you see the bordering area of Bhutan down below with the India, that only 5 or 7 districts have been endemic. The more you go on elevation side, there is no malaria. So they are basically malaria. So elevation, land use, how they are using the land, whether the agriculture land is built, coming under the building construction, which you see in and around many of the developing countries. Water bodies, what is the water bodies, whether those water bodies are actually good for the breeding of the Anopheles vectors for malaria transmission or not. Then what is the potential animal reservoirs of infection, if it is there. So it may not be there for this. Now, this is very important for, especially when you are talking of fourth, fifth species, novel site. Then your vector distribution, whether published or unpublished, or your own reports, which are mostly government setup, the reports are remain as a report because the priorities on the report and documentation, not more on the publication side. But you have to collect all those information. Then undertake additional surveys if at all. You have to look beyond the map. Whatever map you have prepared, one map is based on the case incidence. The second map is based on the usual vector abundance. Then if something more is required, you have to look beyond the map, because these things, elevation, land use, water bodies, potential, these things, population, this will not be in usual maps with the vector-borne disease control program. That is what I'm telling, looking beyond the maps in the stratification. When you are stratifying all those things, before you superimpose all those things for analysis purposes, you should see where there is an inadequate epidemiological data, and which we are going to face now. The moment the case load will be decreasing and we will be entering into the elimination phase. Then urban ecosystem, then rural and urban population. The gap between rural and urban, earlier it used to be like this, now it is all mixed. There is no gap between rural and urban. So the fringe area is basically under influence of both rural vector and urban vector. So that is what. Similarly, forest fringe area. This is basically under the jungle breeder vectors and the rural land area, which is forest fringe area is again in the under the influence of the multiple vectors. So we have to assess their density and proportion. Now, last 2 slides are there. This is very important slides. I'll try to explain it, that if you have the different categories of vector control, environmental, mechanical, biological, chemical, if you see. In environmental, there are different types: source reduction, habitat manipulation, irrigation management, proximity with livestock, and waste management. You have to manage this. These are all the environment which are creating congenial conditions. Now, how are you going to do? Which you are talking of malaria. See, this source reduction environment, though one is very effective against all the 5 diseases, source reduction, the habitat manipulation, the malaria, it is all good. We have to concentrate only on this line, this column, malaria. So waste management may not be very effective against the malaria vectors. Sometimes nowadays it has become effective because of lot many waste products in the urban area which are discarded things which are sent. So that waste management is there. That is very important. So we have to add another plus line here also for malaria, urban malaria as well. Now, if you see mechanical barrier which you are creating, house improvement is okay. Removal of trapping, that is actually more on the dengue and this thing on visceral leishmaniasis, because when you use the sticky trap. But polystyrene beads, there was a trial for malaria, but whether this mechanical, this is not recommended under the program, because there was a lot of nuisance when there is a water level is up. What happens? It is so light that with the little wind velocity, it is gone. And many of the children, they don't see that this is because of the wells covered. So they will jump and they will be drowned. So any risk is avoided in a public health program. We don't take any single risk in this. That is why it was not included. But there are a lot of good results which has come from the polystyrene beads. That is why it is not included. This is a WHO chart which is given. I have just read it, which is not included in the program. Biological control, only biological larvicides have been included here. Natural enemy, fungi, botanical. There are many research papers, articles are published, but it is yet to see the light of the day in the program. Now, if you look on the chemical side, the LLIN, ITN, yes, it is very much effective. Indoor residual sprays, yes. Insecticide treatment of habitat. This is also there, that is IRS or some other kinds of treatment of the habitats, larvicides. But then targets and chemical repellents are not under it. They are all basically under personal protection, but they are the types of this. Now, if you group on the category, same environmental, mechanical, biological, but this type you say where it will be effective. Source reduction, how long it is effective? Yes, it is effective. Both. Habitat manipulation, yes. Plus and minus means it is partly applicable, partly not applicable in the program. Irrigation management, somewhere it is done, somewhere it is not done. But where it is done, safety, yes, source reduction is the most safe. Habitat manipulation is safe. Irrigation management is safe if you do it. The rest of the things are partly safe. Community participation, source reduction is very safe. House improvement, it is always safe because those who have done it, it is always safe. Biological, see, look here. Community participation is safe. Risk for resistance is very safe. There is no resistance so far. But for natural enemy, conservation, these are all some partly safe, partly applicable. They are not applicable. If you come back to chemical side, on this safety and risk resistance affordability, if you see on the chemical side, last row, LLIN, yes, it is effective, beyond doubt. Safety is, yes, partly safe, partly because its insecticide is there. Sometimes it creates itching, sometimes people gets panicky. Community participation, yes, it is okay. But affordability, everywhere it is not affordable. That is why it is given in the priority area. Somewhere it cannot be used in humid climate, post rainy season, it cannot be used. People will not use it. So it will be waste of resources. IRS, it is effective beyond doubt, but it is safety is again the insecticide resistance point of view. These things are risk of resistance. Yes, it is there. So you cannot take it. It's a safe. And community participation, usually they don't do. They will only support. Yes, please do our houses, but they will not do the insecticidal spraying. And affordability, you have to see that it is not applicable everywhere. It is applicable again in high risk area. So these are the tables which will give you a reference from WHO so that we understand that how to justify about any product which we are planning and how to do it in how to frame these things in our document with proper justification, proper physical activity, proper calendar of activity, and proper resource planning. Thank you very much. I think I have completed today.
And indeed, you've done a wonderful job as usual, Dr. Pradeep. So again, a very comprehensive and a very clear explanation of the different issues that should be addressed and covered and embraced within your strategic planning thinking. So well done. And from all of us, a great big thank you. Sincerely, Dr. Pradeep, well done indeed. So I see we've got quite a few questions today,
Right.
more so than yesterday. 14 questions. Are you going to mind running through?
I'll answer one by one.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, I'll leave you to it. Thank you, Dr. Pradeep.
So on the similar pattern like yesterday, I'll just read and then I'll go on answering, clarifying if I can to the best of my knowledge.
Excellent. Thank you
Some
for
of the
that.
questions have been asked by very senior experienced person. Maybe it is for the benefit of the whole audience. They have
Absolutely. Yeah.
flagged these issues. I appreciate that. Let's start with Mohammed Mukhtar. Thank you very much, Dr. Mukhtar. Dr. Pradeep, thank you so much for your wonderful talk going on. Much appreciated. May I request you to elaborate the site transparency dynamics where you talked about the number of rounds? I understand. I have read this question during the break time. See, what happens? First thing is that if you study the transmission dynamics, you are trying to get rid of through the spraying. Now, the problem is you have got insecticide for a limited efficacy period. Any insecticide, it is ranges, the residual efficacy is ranging from 6 weeks to 8 weeks. Why residual efficacy is very important? Because the mosquitoes, vector mosquitoes, they take the blood, they will rest inside on the walls. So we are talking about the rural vectors where we are doing indoor residual spray. We take the advantage of that habit and we try to cover that area, resting area with the insecticidal spray. How long it will remain? In health setup, in vector-borne disease control program, the basic philosophy of the spraying is you use less quantity of insecticide with the lower doses because target insect is mosquito, but with longer duration because every day it will come take the blood and then take rest and then go for egg laying. So it will pick up some of the quantity. May not be one dose is enough for them, but repeated dose. Why? Because our aim is to reduce the longevity. Mosquitoes should not be allowed to survive so long that from gametocide pickup day to sporozoite, which is usually 8 to 10 days, it should not be allowed. So mosquitoes should die before the sporozoite. Now taking that 6 to 8 weeks, if the residual efficacy is there, whatever mosquitoes are coming, they are trying to pick up the insecticide and getting died before they are mature enough to transmit the disease. It goes on that cycle. Now, when you are doing in public health program, you are analyzing the total transmission period, the peak of the transmission period. So before the pickup starts, that is what I showed in that graph. Before the pickup starts of the disease season, you start spraying that so that the pickup, if it was to this level, it should be at this level. So if your spraying is covering from this to this end, that is one round, 2.5 months. But if you have got seasonality, that peak is only for during the whole peak is for 4 or 5 months. So in regularity, continuously, if you spray, so that spray umbrella is your epidemiological, I mean, you are covering the transmission period. So transmission period is covered with 2 rounds or 3 rounds. Like for example, if you are using Malaria, you have to use 3 rounds of spray because 6 weeks only the residual efficacy. But if synthetic pyrethroid is it is also 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, so you can have only 2 rounds. But simultaneously, in many of the area, if you have the persistent transmission, perennial transmission, maybe at lower level, but at fag end, as I gave the example of fluviatilis maintenance, so you can, if you require, you can have additional rounds or you can have divided rounds. For example, I have one example in Karnataka itself that you don't do continuous round. You do one first round in February, March, and then you do second round in later part of the monsoon. Similarly, for other diseases also, you don't do continuously. But this was traditionally, by and large, in India, we were covering 5.5 months, 5 months with 2 rounds. That was helpful for continuously engaging and keeping intact the seasonal laborers for spraying. That was the only thing. I think I have explained it. Then there was another question from Dr. Joshi had just recommended the questions of Dr. Mukhtar only. My next suggestion to elaborate the role of ITN in outdoor transmission, as we all know that there is an outdoor transmission in Asia Pacific region, and there is a strategic planning point of view, we need some. This is a very important and actually challenging question, and there is no one round of clear answer, because in many of the national program, outdoor transmission has, and even in the strategic plan also document, outdoor transmission has been flagged as a challenge, but proper concrete solution like has been given for the indoor residual spray or LLIN, it has not been given for outdoor transmission. Very recently, last year, WHO has brought out, because different products are coming. Some people are coming with helmets, some people are coming with collar radiant, laborers are moving in the field. Outdoor transmission is basically maintained and established because people's behavior who are sleeping outside, who are residing outside, who are working outside in different times, which is congenial for mosquitoes who are biting outside. Now, to how to adopt, this is people's behavior. They have to protect themselves. Or we have some Zoom cultivation where they go for that. So the issue is that whatever product which are being designed for containment of outdoor personal protection purposes, whether it is a repellent, whether it is a reflectant, whether it is a diversion, whether so WHO has come out with a new document, PPC, preferred public product. They have made a different category. Now they are making another guidelines that they will list out all those products which are coming. Once those listed things are coming up, then the national authorities will take the cognizance of those which is feasible and those things. But till that time, role of ITN and LIN for those is always recommended. Those who are sleeping outside, may not be in only jungles, maybe outside the houses. So if they can use, I showed you one picture that that is neither outdoor nor indoor. There's only one roof, that's all. So it is just like an outdoor. So if they are putting, they should use the LLIN and that will protect them. At this juncture, that is the only answer. Or if they can afford, that is the personal protection using the cream. But that is again, there's a limitation 6 hours or 8 hours. Because source reduction in jungle breeders, it will be very, very difficult. Though there are committee which has been recommended, like forest committee, like tribal committee, so they should take care of the forest small after the monsoon. There are small pockets. If you sensitize the forest people, so forest area, the people who are working or the resettlement people, they will get benefit of those vectors which are breeding as a jungle pool breeder, like especially for the by my complex. Then there is another question. How can you compare the rate of malaria prevention between Asia and Africa? No, actually beyond the scope of this course, how can you compare the rate of malaria? What is this? Prevalence? Prevalence. It should be prevalence. That is simple. Any country or any area within your own country, the different districts, you work out the malaria cases prevalence or malaria case incidence per 1,000 population on seasonality and put the two different curves or two different graphs for different divisions and compare it. That is actually their transmission dynamics is because of Heteroparvus and Gambi basically. And here in Southeast Asia, I have shown you the Calicifaces group, the Stephensii, the Annularis, the Minimus group, the Baimai group, the Maculatus group, all these are transmitting. So there are different kinds of vectors which are responsible. But if you want to have the malaria prevalence, you can have the malaria prevalence month-wise. You take the data from them and take the data from them and see what is the trend analysis. Then there is a Vikas Gehlaut. Happy Teachers Day. What is this? I want to know that I want to do a training on course of geospatial mapping. Don't worry, we will start this training and we will call the experts. This is not very difficult. We have also learned, so we can do it. There's no issue. No doubts, our talk on malaria and Sri Lanka experience, we should not forget. Other side which is developing moreover my Aedes larval incidents and COVID travel. I mean, this is not a question, Kitty Joshi. Please suggest some names which is using for Aedes traps. We will please send your mail. We will share those things. There are plenty people who are coming and they are going for verification or validation of their traps. Have you said that 85% coverage can be taken as full coverage for IRS? It may be wrong, though. If yes, is it WHO recommended when it will be done? Dilruba Shaheen, please, you are from, I do not know where from. If you are from India, you can read our national guidelines. 85% IRS coverage has been the targeted approach right from the beginning. It has never been 100% coverage. You cannot have, in fact, you get only 60% below 60%, but 85% room coverage. Targeted rooms coverage 85%. I have not told 85% coverage because there are three coverage in terms of population, coverage in terms of room, coverage in terms of room plus cattle sheds. So rooms coverage should be above 85%, quality, uniform coverage with no partial coverage. Then can we use two vector control measures like IRS and LI in the same area? We have been doing this. This is the usual practice that IRS, but very recently WHO, because of resistance monitoring pressure and resistance status developing, they have come out that the similar insecticide should not be used in both the combination. But what is the choice? That nobody tells. That choice with the regulatory authorities, you don't. Malathion is not accepted. DDT is already phased out because of persistent organic pollutants. Malathion, nobody accepts because of pungent odor. Synthetic pyrethroid is the only choice for IRS. Synthetic pyrethroid is the only choice for LLIN, because so far no other compounds has been come out with the impregnation. Some countries they are using, yes, the carbamate insecticide as an IRS spray. But in India, we are using both. But we are trying now. WHO recommends that same compound should not be used. But the technical question is here, which I am flagging, that whether it is so fast, it is developing the resistance because of this LLIN uses, which is the quantity, and the IRS. The IRS is being used for a long time. Even if you withdraw LLIN or IRS, whether the resistance will revert back or resistance will maintain something. So it takes some time to precipitate the resistance, but technically, yes, we should try to avoid the similar class, but we don't have anything. What is in our basket? In our basket, we have got delta methane, cyclothranes, lambda cyclothrane, alpha cypermethrin, like that. And out of these, only some compounds are taken for the insecticide impregnation. So either you do this or you do this. Then Dilruba from Bangladesh. Okay. I think I have answered. Thanks for the information session. Do we have any policy guidelines for private companies engaged in pest and vector control activities? Vector control activities, yes, there is an advisory for the private public-private partnership, and there is a through consortium. There was one page note was given, and every time when advisory is issued, that yes, private residential or private companies, they should take care of workplace guidelines. We call it as a workplace guidelines. It is already there. Sir, please throw some more light on adult vector surveillance and importance over larval surveillance, where and when we should decide which stage of vector surveillance to be planned. If the area is, when you are doing preliminary survey, you are collecting everything. And larval survey is more focused on the urbanized sectors. Urbanized sector is a broad term which we are using. Wherever urban kind of situations, urbanized rural area, urbanized towns, municipalities, corporation, different class, mega corporations, different panchayats, different urban locality, different industrial township, different mining industries, different kinds of, like if you go to Jharkhand, you will get 5 mining corporation is there, iron ore companies are there, then there are some building construction. So all those areas you should focus more on larval, because even if you find out entomological surveillance adults, you will not be allowed to do the vector control through IRS. And LLI and most of the people, they have used their own mosquito proofing houses, so they may not allow your IRS, or they may not use LLIN. This is more common for the rural sector. There you should use more on adult vector control and adult vector entomological surveillance. Anything I have forgotten? As far I know, Dilruba again asking, as far I know that after manufacturing the desired insecticide, when it is delivered to the specific country, it is tested in some laboratory of different level of government organization. The releasing agent with active will be also there. So how the efficacy goes lower in the LIN than in the lab test. What I will do, if you can share your mail ID either through Dr. Leo or through me, I'll share that copy of the paper, which you will see that there are 2 different compounds for blocking agent which they release slowly. And if you change that, the people they have studied, the researchers they have studied that because of change of this, the release has not been there. And if the release is not there, insecticide is not there. If the insecticide is not there, so what compound they have tested? They have tested only active ingredient of the insecticide or the releasing agent also. Usually the releasing agent they don't do. I can give you another example of the when they do the tablet testing, whether it's a for LF or for malaria, there is always inert material which are tableting agent. When the like for the say for example diethyl carbamazine citrate DEC 6 milligram per kg body weight, the tablet is 100 milligram, but 100 milligram, what is the total weight of the tablet is little more. So what happens, 85% or 82% content, rest of the content is what? So when you mix up something, when you are doing tableting, you are mixing some agent that is never tested. Only as per pharmacopoeia, you test only the property of the chemical. Similarly, for insecticide, you test the active ingredient, whether the dusting agent or the wetting powder agent, or in the case of LLIN, the dispersing agent or the releasing agent chemical has been tested. I have not seen any report which they have tested it. But if you in your country they are testing it, please check that which company, what they have added and what they have tested. If that matches, it is fine. If it is not matches, you may have different impact. Can we use expired insecticide for the vector control? No, absolutely not. If you want to use, we have been using only for DDT, provided the test is given. If the insecticide is not of good quality, if the insecticide is already expired, it may have other properties developed. For example, if malathion expires, it immediately converts into malaxan, which is much more toxic. If the DDT, everybody knows the DDT, but let us not talk about DDT now, it is phased out. So, similarly, for synthetic pyrethroid, they are basically on different chemical structure, they are different compounds, so they are basically of the same group, but they have a different isomeric component. So if they are expired, if it is in water dispersible powder, you should test it. What is its suspensibility? What is its retention quality? What is its wetting agent? What are the components which has expired? And what is its toxicity? Then if it is allowed within the permissible limit, immediately you can use. But by and large, no, it should not be used. I think I have finished all those things, Dr. Leo.
Dr. Leo, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. You're quite right. So I think we've run out of time as well, Dr. Pradeep.
Okay.
And
Sorry.
I'm going to ask participants apologies, but we need to close the session. Remember your questions. Maybe you can repose them during tomorrow's session. I'd be grateful for that, for your understanding. So, Dr. Pradeep, again, from all of us, for sharing your decades of experience, your understanding. Thank you so much for that. To our audience, for your patience, for your interest. Wonderful to see such high level of interest. We're very grateful to have you participate. We're all learning. It's to the benefit of us all for contributing towards malaria elimination, making us all a bit better in doing that. So until tomorrow's session, sincere thank you all. Remember, 12 o'clock Bangkok time tomorrow, our third day of presentations. Thank you.